When millionaire businesswoman Pamela Hargan and her adult daughter were found dead, it first looked like a murder-suicide.
But investigators weren't so sure. To them, the scene looked staged.
But then, who did it? And why? And would the police be able to prove it?
We're doing a full recap of Blood is Thicker on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time. Jeff, you know when you're in a pickle and you're trying to figure out a mystery that's in front of you? Whether that mystery is, where did I leave my phone? Why are my sunglasses not where they should be? Do you know what you should do in those moments?
when you're in a pickle.
When you're in a pickle?
What should you do?
Pause, reset, and get your calm from going to patreon.com/so much crime, so little time, because there you'll get the warm and fuzzy feeling of supporting a small podcast like ours. You'll also get really funny outtakes and some bonus content, as well as early release episodes. And by the time you've signed up, I guarantee your pickle will be solved. You will know where your sunglasses are. You'll be able to find your phone.
Patreon.com/so much crime, so little time.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, we're just going to give you a quick warning.
Warning.
This episode is going to have spoilers for Blood is Thicker. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
You'll also find a link for Blood is Thicker in our show notes.
Okay, before we jump into our full recap, let's remind ourselves and the listeners a little bit about this podcast and the crime that took place. So the podcast was released in spring of 2024. Its host was Peter Van Sant. There's only 5 episodes and they're all about 30 minutes long. But Jeff, what is the crime that we hear about here?
Yeah, so in our preview episode, we talked about the first episode. In that episode, there was the discovery of 2 women dead in their home in McLean, Virginia. It was Pamela Hargan and her 24-year-old daughter, Helen. We heard from detectives as they started to investigate the case. We also heard from Helen's older sisters, Ashley and Megan. There was initially a presumption that this might have been a murder-suicide, with Helen murdering her mother and then herself. There was also, so we heard that maybe Helen was upset because of an argument with her mother over Helen's boyfriend, Carlos Gutierrez. But by the end of the episode, it sounded like detectives weren't sure that was really what happened. And that's kind of where we left it before we went on to listen to the rest of the series. So, Dee, we've listened to the whole thing. Where do you want to start?
I want to start by posing a question to you.
Okay.
Was it hard for you to not listen to the next episode? Like, is this a podcast that when one episode ended, you wanted to listen to the next episode?
Yes and no. I think yes, because it kind of left on little cliffhangers. But I wouldn't say...
not huge ones, though. I know you said little, but like they weren't dramatically leaving it
right
at the end of every episode.
But I also think this story kind of quickly became obvious what it was. And there weren't a lot of twists and turns.
Really?
Oh, you disagree?
Well, there's 5 episodes long. First episode is like setting the scene. The second episode, they introduce the possibility that someone else is involved, and kind of the suspicion is kind of a little bit on Megan, but it's also on Carlos Gutierrez. And then I think from the third and fourth episodes and 5th, it's heavily on Megan.
Right.
But you then have this pivot about the court case having to be retried. Like, it's 5 episodes. It's only 2.5 hours long. Like, what more do you want? How many more pivots do you want?
I guess I felt like it was alluded to, and we talked about this in our preview, that it couldn't have been a murder-suicide. If it was a murder-suicide, there's no story here, and we wouldn't be listening to this as a podcast. So that was thrown out. We talked about the question of the boyfriend being involved, Carlos, but I feel like I felt pretty clear from the preview that he couldn't have. I mean, he was 1,000 miles away, first of all. And the second episode really established that. I mean, first of all, we got to talk about that second episode, his efforts to get 911 to do something.
My God. There's another pivot, another wild situation that happens in this. I don't know what more you wanted from them. I couldn't stop listening to this.
So that was the answer to your question. That was the correct answer to your question.
That was the correct answer. Yeah.
Okay. Wait, what was the other pivot?
Well, like the pivot, even like, so in episode 2, Carlos is trying to get on and everyone is being so mean to him.
Yeah.
I'm like, why don't you believe him? Like, at first I was like, do they just have this like play by play that they have to stick to? But it just seemed bizarre to me that if someone is calling up saying like, my girlfriend, like, I think she's about to be killed. She's in Virginia. I need to talk to someone. Someone has to go there. And people are asking him to file reports. Like, that seems baffling to me.
It is
and
baffling.
It wasn't just one person.
No, it was multiple people, including one that we heard no longer works for 911. Which...
Yeah. But, I mean, you don't know. That might have been her last day.
Sure.
Like, we don't know. Maybe she left. Like, it was never alluded to that she was, like, fired because of this.
That episode,
or, like,
though,
maybe I think you had to infer that that was the case.
The idea that he can't get the police to go out and check on these people. They can't even... And okay, so to be fair, I guess, if we want to think about this on the other side, he's calling from Texas, I believe, and they're in Virginia. He doesn't know the address. And
that was a bit wild.
So it is a little complicated. But at the same time, it sounded like it took him forever to get them to figure it out. And meanwhile, I mean, he knew that the mom had been killed. So there's at least...
Like, at what point was Helen killed?
Right. It's possible that sort of 911 incompetence cost Helen's life. I don't know. We don't know that. But so that was really frustrating. My point was just that, like, from that moment on, to me, okay, Megan did this. It's just a matter of, will they catch her? How will they catch her? There were some really interesting bits to this story, I thought. So I thought that the whole thing with the boyfriend was really interesting, the way the family treated him or didn't even know him. Megan's 4.5-hour police interview, where the police kind of couldn't get her to leave. Yeah, that was interesting. I kept thinking
also,
of
like Megan telling Helen that she did it.
Yeah.
I just like, I don't understand. Like, what was her play there? Was she thinking Helen might be like, "Yay, money for us all"? Like,
I mean, okay.
What was her play?
I'm gonna take back what I said. This was pretty captivating from the start.
Of course, you're going to take it back. You were completely wrong.
Because there was also the whole Capital One. Was it Capital One? Yeah, Capital One thing, where yes, Megan is trying to pretend to be her mother to get $400,000 and change to buy a house. I think that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to buy a house, and she calls. It gets flagged for fraud, and then.
Why do you reckon her mum didn't want to help her buy the house?
Maybe she knew she was a sociopath. I don't know. Because her mom seemed incredibly generous.
She didn't want Molly to be living with them.
There are some things, and it acknowledges at the very end that we really don't know anything about Megan's husband, Molly's dad.
No.
He didn't participate in this. He doesn't sound like he really talked to detectives more than he had to. And he's now cut Molly off from the whole rest of the family, from her aunt,
so sad.
Grandfather. Yeah. Yeah, I was really hoping. It's funny, actually. It's not funny. It's sad. I was writing my notes as I was listening to that last episode, and I was starting to write that Ashley, the other sister, got custody of Molly because she sought custody, because I just was like hoping that's where this was going, and that's not what happened. No. Yeah, I mean, it's tragic. I mean, for this little girl who was what, like 8 or something when all this happened?
Yeah.
Wait, I want to go back to the Capital One thing. Have you ever been on the phone with a bank and had to go through this process of like the fraud detection, or like the thing where they ask you the security questions, or like...
Yeah.
And like the question here was something around like what color was your 1991 Chevy Cavalier? And one of the answers is like, you never had a 1991 Chevy Cavalier. Those questions make me so like anxious of like...
sometimes I'm so confused. I can't remember what I put down.
Yeah.
It's like, where were you born? And I'm like, am I supposed to say the hospital? Am I supposed to say like the county?
Right.
Am I supposed to say the suburb within the county? Or am I just supposed to say the country? Like, who knows?
Well, and sometimes they ask those questions based on the records that they pull on you. And so they're not even things that you set up. It's just like something, they have like the records of the houses you've lived in. Like for me, I've lived in 37 different places. And they ask like, did you ever have this address, this street? And it's like, maybe.
That's a real shady sign, I think. What are you running from that you've had to move 36 times? We're
not talking about our crimes. We're talking about other crimes on the podcast that we talk about.
That's for the 90th episode. We'll delve into our own crimes.
I will say Capital One, a bank that I don't personally do business with, comes off looking real good here. They seem very professional, very friendly customer service agents.
Yeah.
And love that they record all those calls. That was super helpful.
It was a nice primary source because we didn't get any of the testimonies from either of the court battles.
Yeah.
From the court at all because they didn't release them. So we heard like second-hand accounts of what went down. So it was a little bit lacking in the primary sources, where in the first episode we heard that harrowing. The detective had somehow been able to record his conversations with the family at the very start. Remember?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because we talked about that in the preview about how that was an unusual thing to be able to hear. So now knowing, we were hearing Megan, Ashley, and the dad learn.
Ashley wasn't there for a long time in it. She only came in at the very end.
Okay. So Megan was there, but we were talking about how...
and she was the one who, remember I was saying she so quickly was like, Helen. Helen's been possibly taking drugs and we've been worried about her and all this. She was the one to quickly kind of say that.
Yeah, it's interesting to think back on that now, because it seemed like it felt uncomfortable to listen to this woman hear about her mother and sister's death like that. But knowing that she did it and was acting and basically setting this all up, I don't know.
She was like, I just want to see them. I want to see them. I just need to get to them. I need to see them.
Yeah.
It's so weird. Also, like, it was a really badly planned crime.
Terribly planned.
Apart from the fact that it was harrowing, and like, she was in the podcast described by someone as a sociopath, and she didn't seem to have much remorse for anything that happened, but like so badly planned.
Yeah, I mean, so
the phones left on their bodies, like on top of them, where they could never have fallen.
The phones left where they could never have fallen. The phones wiped clean of fingerprints. When, like they said, they made one of the detectives made the point of like, any phone always has fingerprints on it because you're touching your phone with your finger.
All the time.
Yeah, so a clean phone is immediately suspicious.
And like, it wouldn't have been suspicious if Megan's fingerprints had been on it, because surely she could be like, oh, I just picked up my phone and gave it to my mum when it was calling earlier or whatever.
Right.
When it was ringing or whatever. It's not a big deal for your fingerprints to be on a family member's phone.
Right. So there was that. There was the fact that Megan called Capital One again after we know that Pamela was dead to pretend to be her. Then there was the Helen crime scene.
That's just so cold.
Yeah.
I know so much of it is, but like, and her daughter's in the house, and like, this is like similar to Deadly Mirage. Like, I'm like, what's your game here? Like, this is purely for money. And like, the 400,000 or whatever she was going to get from her mother to buy the house. Obviously, if her mother died and she wasn't convicted, she'd get a lot more money. Right. But like, it's not that, like, it's not that much money to be like, not that there's a number that you would do this for, but like, I don't know. It seems like they were really well supported. It didn't seem like there was any sort of animosity, but there has to have been more to this that we just don't get exposed to.
Maybe. I mean, it feels like we're missing some of the motive. It's possibly tied up with the husband that we didn't hear from, or something about that relationship between Megan and her mother that we don't know about. But
Ashley would know.
I also feel like enough times it really just is about the money. Like, people, how many crimes have we heard about where it really just was about the money?
It's just such a shite excuse. Like, it's not as, like, especially when it's so badly planned.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, if you're going to do this for a pretty modest amount of money in terms of how much her mother had, I suppose, but how have you not planned this even a little bit?
Yeah.
Like, there was no planning. And then why did she tell Helen? I just don't understand.
I mean, she told Helen with enough time for Helen to call Helen's boyfriend, Carlos, which just totally blew up her plan.
But what, like, do you think Megan was like, I'm going to tell Helen, and Helen might be like, deadly, money's coming our way? Why would she tell her?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. So many things here don't make sense. I also, that 4.5-hour police interview with Megan, where, so some of that, it sounds like she was acting, she was making up, that she brought in these possible other suspects, these people that she saw in the neighborhood that no one else seemed to have seen. She overreacted to them asking if she'd ever used drugs. What do you make of that? Like, what was her thought process of like, she could have got up and walked away at any time.
Yeah, but if she got up and walked away, would you not just think she's guilty?
Maybe after like 2 hours?
I don't know. I think she was like, I don't know. Maybe she was on drugs.
Maybe.
None of her decisions were, I don't mean good, because look, she murdered 2 people.
Right.
But none of her decisions seemed to even like support her trying to get away with it. You know, she wasn't making good decisions to get away with the crimes that she committed.
No, if there was a sort of master plan here, it's not obvious what it was.
No.
It certainly wasn't good. Like, it wasn't well thought out. She didn't cover her tracks very well. Yeah. What do you think of the problem with the juror in the first trial?
Wild. I never have heard of this before. So just to jog everyone's memories, basically after a trial, also something I didn't know is that the police often, or the prosecutor and the defense often, contact the jurors just to be like, hey, we won. What was it in particular that you, like, what did we do to like make you feel like that? Or the opposite, like if they lost, like, is there anything we can do better, anything we can learn from next time? I never knew that they did that. And by doing that, the defense asked a juror, what was it that, you know, why couldn't we convince you? And she basically admitted to trying to reconstruct the toe on the trigger scenario put forward by the defense.
It was by some type of expert analyst, right?
But it was the prosecutors had brought the analyst in. Yeah,
and so the idea is that it was technically maybe possible that Helen could have used this gun with this angle, the trajectory of the bullet to. It's highly unlikely that she was the one holding the gun based on the analysis of the crime scene. But so the juror tested that out basically to see if it was plausible, which I don't know. It seems like that's doing your due diligence. But then the juror went back and told the rest of the jury that basically, yeah, there's no way.
It couldn't have been.
Yeah. I knew a little something about this. I'm kind of surprised that you didn't. Because of a movie I just watched a couple of weeks ago called Juror Number 2, which...
Oh. Is it good?
It's good. It is Toni Collette is the prosecutor. Chris Messina is the defense attorney. Nicholas Hoult is Juror Number 2. And it's Clint Eastwood. Clint Eastwood directed the movie. So like 99-year-old Clint Eastwood is possibly his final movie. But so in this movie, one of the other jurors is, I don't think this is a spoiler for the movie because this happens pretty early on. But so the premise of the movie is that Nicholas Hoult gets put on this murder trial where the boyfriend is accused of murdering his girlfriend. And Nicholas Hoult gets put on the jury. Nicholas Holt's wife is like 8 months pregnant with a high-risk pregnancy. So he's like trying to get out of it. And then he gets put on the jury. And like the very first day, this is 5 minutes into the movie, he realizes, Nicholas Hoult, that he actually murdered this woman. It was an accident, but I mean, you learn a lot more about it as you watch the movie. So then that's the tension in the movie of like, he's on the jury trying to decide if this guy should be convicted. But one of the other jurors is J.K. Simmons, who is a former cop And this topic of jurors doing research comes up. I probably shouldn't say any more about it. It's worth watching. It's a good movie. But yeah, this whole thing comes up, as well as the prosecutor talking to the juror after the case is over. That happens in this movie as well. So I just learned about this, and it was,
Interesting.
Yeah. It's also Toni Collette is awesome.
Oh. She's amazing. Yeah, I just didn't realize that it wasn't allowed.
Well,
it seems kind of funny.
I looked it up for like what are the most common forms of juror misconduct, and apparently this one of basically feeling like you're doing the right thing by doing some research about the case is the single like the most common thing that happens with juries. And I mean, there's other things like, you're not supposed to talk about the case. Like that, I feel like is more obvious, or you just don't get along with the other jurors. Like that can lead to this. But yeah, like I feel like it's so hard to sit in that room with that jury and have to only use the information that you were provided in the trial, especially if it's something that you don't know anything about, and it's right there to do the work. I don't know. Have you ever served on a jury?
No.
I haven't either.
I didn't. I think in Ireland for teachers, if you were ever called, you could get an exemption because teachers were in such shortage that they wouldn't be able to fill the position. So the school would be able to say that they were not able to let you go for any length of time.
So you wouldn't even have gotten called, or
you could get called.
Okay, but you didn't have
you
to.
Could.
You never got called.
Yeah,
I got called
once. My brothers have. Two of my brothers have.
But this was 18 years ago, and I was primary caregiver for a baby who's now in college, and so I didn't go. And then that was I guess 18 years ago, and I've never done it since. But now I know.
It's because you keep moving house; they don't even know where you are.
I lived in my last place for 8 years. I voted.
Mad about
pay taxes.
The Excel sheet and like with all the account details and passwords was a mad find. It was interesting as well because it wasn't on their list for the warrant. They couldn't take it, but they were able to take a photo, and the next time they came back, it was gone. I
feel like there was some real good police work that we heard about.
Yeah.
So that woman who was, I don't know if she's a detective or whatever, I don't know what her title was, but who discovered that sheet because she went in the basement. There was this knife that someone had apparently been practicing with a knife. And then she's like, I want to learn more about what these victims were like these people were like in life. So she pulls a photo album off the shelf. And behind the photo album, like a bundle of photo albums, was this spreadsheet with all the passwords and things. And she had the fortitude to take a picture of it, even though she wasn't allowed to take it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great police work.
Clever. It was. Come here, I want to read out some Reddit reviews to you.
Let's do it.
Very few of them because I think maybe because it's so new. I'm not sure.
Pretty new, yeah.
Someone said, I actually listened to the entire series twice because I had so many questions after it. So someone had posted like, has anyone listened? That was the response. And then someone responded to them saying, I still don't understand what the entire family had against the boyfriend. Even after the verdict, the one sister kept calling him names and insulting him in interviews. But he's the only one who cared enough to call 911, and the case would have never been looked into or solved without him. She owed him a thank you, not an insult. And then people are giving out about the family like leaving the blankets and stuff on the drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, really weird. Someone said, OMG, the host of Blood is Thicker speaks so slow and paced that I feel like he thinks I'm stupid. And I need to hear every word very clearly or else I won't understand. That's how it's typed.
Okay. I was going to ask you what you thought of our host, Peter.
I was laughing at this one because I listened to most of it on 1.2 and some of it on 1.5. When I went back a second time, I listened to it on 1.5. But because I listened to it on 1.2, I'm like, maybe I just heard him speaking normally, but he was actually speaking very slowly.
I thought he was fine. Yeah, I mean, he didn't bring a lot of like personality. He was very just sort of dry to the point. But sometimes you want that, don't you?
I mean, there's just too much story here. It seems to me like they were really trying to keep this to 30 minutes, 5 episodes, 30 minutes each. So there's not enough time for him to get his personality in there.
Do you know anything about this guy?
Mm-mm.
All right. So
Did you look him up and research him and stuff?
Just now. He's won 4 Emmys.
Such an overachiever. 4 Emmys.
3 Edward R. Murrow Awards, 2 Overseas Press Club Awards, some other awards as well. So he's older. He's born in 1953, and he's worked for CBS News. It looks like since 1984. He reported on the collapse of the Soviet Union, the first Gulf War, famine in Africa. He's interviewed everyone from Julie Andrews, Christopher Plummer, Garth Brooks, Nick Nolte, Leanne Womack. He did a 48-hour special on the Oklahoma City bombing. He's reported on the September 11th attacks, Hurricane Katrina, the Virginia Tech massacre. So he's kind of been everywhere and covered everything. I thought he was solid. I'm also coming off of a Dateline one where...
Do you know what we didn't get?
What? Metaphors.
Similes?
There were no similes. I want to ask you about the ending. So there is a little bit of editorializing at the end about how this family will never get closure and how they'll never be the same in crimes like these. There is no closure that can happen no matter what happens. You can find the person who did it. They can be sentenced to life in prison like has happened here. But that doesn't bring a sense of closure to the family or anything sort of close to sort of satisfying a resolution. What did you think of that ending?
I mean, I thought it ended really well. I don't know. It didn't feel overly dramatic of an ending.
Yeah.
But it felt, I think it was important for them to say, in a situation like this, if it had been someone they didn't know that had committed the murders, it would have been hard to get over. But the fact that this was the other sister, and like Ashley has gone from having 2 sisters and her mom, like who she was really close with, to having basically none of them.
Yeah.
Like, how could they get over that? I thought the snippet from the dad was really nice. It was short and concise, and he kind of said his piece, and that was it. I don't know. I thought it ended really well.
Yeah, I agree. I thought it was a powerful ending. I like that. It was short and to the point. I mean, there was, like you said, there was a lot of story here, but we didn't belabor any of it. If anything, there was a point where I thought, oh, we're circling back in time to cover this same moment from other angles, which was that 5th day after the murder when Megan goes in and has that long interview. That got covered in different ways over the course of the episodes, but it was a straightforward enough, like, linear story that it didn't, like, I wasn't confused by it. I was able to follow it really well. So, yeah, this was a nice, I think, tightly edited, well-produced story.
Yeah, harrowing. Worst nightmares.
Yeah. So you would recommend this?
I would recommend this, definitely.
Yeah.
Metaphor free.
I think this is one of the stronger ones we listened to lately.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was.
Before we go, if you have such positive feelings about this show you're listening to as we do about Blood is Thicker, what a great time to leave a comment, whether you're on Spotify, Apple. Also, if you haven't yet, give us a rating, 5-star rating. We really appreciate that. And then when you're done with that, go out, tell some friends, post it on your social media, tell people that you see on the street. If you want to get a t-shirt so people can say, like, so much crime, so little time, what's that? It's this great podcast. You can get it on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to podcasts. Whatever your method of sharing that information with the world, please do. Thank you. Next time, we're heading to the other edge of the U.S., San Francisco. It's 1974, and a man is preying on the gay community, possibly murdering as many people as the Zodiac Killer. 50 years later, can a renewed search finally track down the serial killer? We're previewing The Doodler. That's on the next So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Calariso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.